It is 19 minutes past 7. It's BBC Breakfast. You're watching this morning on this Monday morning. And let's tell you a bit more about a new package of funding worth £4 billion to go towards the cost of replacing dangerous cladding, which is going to be unveiled by the government a little later today.
Well, what it does mean is that residents in buildings under 18 metres in height will no longer have to pay the crippling costs of having their cladding replaced. Our business correspondent Sarah Corker is outside one of the affected buildings in Manchester this morning. Sarah, I know you've followed this story very closely. You've spoken to lots of residents who are having to face this cost. How significant is this?
Yes, that's right. Good morning to you both. This is one of thousands of buildings across the UK caught up in the wider building safety crisis. Now here it's actually the timber cladding that's the problem. It needs to be removed, and leaseholders have been facing these massive astronomical bills. And because this building is under 18 metres, under that height limit, it hasn't been eligible for government money to help fix the problems. As you say, it's buildings over that height that have so far qualified for those government grants worth millions of pounds. And for more than a year now, flat owners have been facing the prospect of these long-term loans to fix the building, to make their homes safe. But as you say, all that is about to change. We're expecting this significant announcement in Westminster later today. And Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, will say there will be more help, more financial assistance for thousands of people living in these low and mid-rise blocks. Removing dangerous cladding on buildings across Britain. Since the Grenfell tragedy nearly 5 years ago, the row over who should pay to make other tower blocks safe has only intensified. The government will confirm later today that people living in smaller blocks will not have to foot the bill for cladding costs. But non-cladding faults won't be covered. Campaigners like Sophie from Stevenage want ministers to go further.
It is a positive step that the government have finally agreed that leaseholders shouldn't be part of the solution to the building safety crisis. But it really doesn't go far enough in terms of the interim costs and all of the other fire safety defects that these buildings have. You can't make the building safe in terms of cladding and not fire barriers, smoke seals, insulation, because the buildings will still be classed as unsafe.
The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, will tell Parliament that innocent leaseholders should not have to shoulder the burden. A £4 billion scheme will help people living in buildings between 11 and 18 metres who have previously missed out on grants to remove cladding. Mr Gove will warn developers they'll be expected to pay for the scheme or face legal or tax changes. There will also be more money for fire alarms, a review of the scale of the work actually needed, and leaseholders will also be given more time to sue builders over defective flats, up to 30 years after construction. At the moment, it's 6 years. Developers often argue they met building regulations at the time and so shouldn't be liable for these costs. But all of this has already dragged on for years. None of these solutions will be quick or easy. And the financial situation for many is already critical. Sarah Corker, BBC News. Now, this is the latest attempt from the government to try and resolve what has become a really significant crisis. Well, Giles Grover from Manchester Gladiators is with us this morning. Good morning, Giles. Hi. You've got a meeting with Michael Gove later today alongside campaigners from across the UK. What points will you be making to him and what do you hope to get out of the meeting more broadly?
So the first thing to do is to thank him for the fact that he's only been 4 months in the job and he seems to have got a lot further along than his predecessor has. There is more funding. We know it's a complex challenge, but the fact is that he's made a start. We will also be letting him know politely where we think there are still gaps and what more he needs to do.
Now, we are expecting this package of measures worth perhaps up to £4 billion. But there are, of course, many caveats, many nuances to that. And it's unlikely to cover what we call non-cladding faults. So just explain that and what that means for leaseholders.
Yeah, so we started off as End Our Cladding Scandal, the national campaign. For the last 2 years, we've been saying it. The government knows it. Mr Gove knows it. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor knows that there's a lot more issues beyond cladding. We know that he's made a start, but we've got problems in terms of internal compartmentation, balconies. There's buildings below 11 metres that are being told to remediate as well. So he still doesn't have a grip of the full crisis, but it's a good start. However, you can't make buildings half safe, and people are still trapped, unfortunately.
So leaseholders would still have to find the money to pay for those problems. There might be funding for the cladding, but actually they still have to find the funding themselves for the other problems.
Yeah. Some analysis that was done last year saw that that was about half of the overall cost. So it might be that it'll be providing more certainty on risk prioritisation, so that work doesn't need to be done. As it stands, it still needs to be done. People are still going to have to fork out tens of thousands of pounds, unfortunately.
And the other issue is the wider impact on the housing market. It's estimated 3 million flats are currently unsellable. Lenders are asking for these expensive fire safety certificates when they're perhaps not needed. There's a shortage of fire engineers to carry that out. So what are you hoping Mr Gove may do to restore confidence to the industry, to get lenders lending again?
Yeah, there needs to be certainty for residents, for leaseholders, and certainty for the housing market. We've seen flat sales fall completely off the cliff, so the government's still kind of relying a little bit too much on industry, telling the mortgage providers, telling the lenders, telling the insurers, telling the surveyors in silos, you should do a little bit here. We need a coordinated, holistic approach, and we need more of a centralised approach so that there's an independent body that says, you definitely need to do this work or you don't need to do this work. Then we might be actually making some progress.
Giles Grover from Manchester Gladiators, always good to speak to you, thank you very much. Now what's not clear at this stage is how the government plans to pressure developers into paying up. We know there will be no new money from the Treasury, so if Mr Gove is unsuccessful in recouping that money from the construction sector, then it will come out of existing departmental budgets, so that could mean less money for levelling up, less money for home building. So we await further details on that announcement, which we expect to be made in the Commons later this afternoon.
Sarah, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like the residents won't fully be celebrating just yet, does it? Sarah Corkett in Manchester, thank you.
And we'll be speaking to Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, in the next sort of 10 minutes or so on the programme. I'm sure he's probably having a cup of tea at the moment. You've got one there, haven't you?
Possibly, yep. Yeah? I've got one on the go.